All right. My name is Ben Burgis. This is Give It an Argument. I am joined by the People's Economics professor, Rob Larson, author of I don't know, many
Books.
good books. What's the most recent one?
Last one's Bit Tyrants, Political Economy of Silicon Valley. Next one is Mastering the Universe on the Ruling Class, which actually has a release date in August of next year. Very exciting.
Hell yeah. And that's from Haymarket.
Indeed.
Nice. All right. So yeah. This is exciting. I've been had for the last couple of weeks for a couple reasons. Had to do the show from home, but back in the studio tonight feels good. Before we get into it, should say that on Sunday, October 22nd at the Moroccan Lounge in Los Angeles, I'm going to be debating Siaka Masakai, who is a PragerU and Babylon Bee contributor. He's the vice chair of the Los Angeles Republican Party. So again, that's the Moroccan Lounge in LA on Sunday, October 22nd. Doors open at 6:30, debates at 7. I actually don't think there is a ticket link in the below you right now, but one will be added forthwith. So do please come check that out. Really looking forward to that.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, no, I think that should be fun. Make it a traveling road show. You can, they must have some conservatives where you live. I'll come over there. But in any case, so yeah, as I saw you say on Twitter, we're kind of taking a break tonight from the unremitting violence and horror in the Middle East to watch one of the I think you said the all-time great Shellakins. This is Bernard Sanders, senator from Vermont, speaking to one of his colleagues, Theodore Cruz of Texas.
Yeah, and just exciting on the face of it, because certainly within the U.S. Senate, that's an unusually broad spectrum of opinion by the standards of U.S. politics, and just especially Sanders, many of us have supported in the past, all this familiarity, and then Ted Cruz, who, obviously the audience will be familiar with the junior senator from Texas. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities to comment on his career, his beliefs, his trips to the Caribbean that get called off quickly, things of that nature.
Yeah, dude. Have you? I think we actually played this on the post game a couple weeks ago, so we probably won't do it right now. But have you seen that super cut of all the times that Ted Cruz was promoting his podcast, during Senate hearings and stuff?
No, I really want to.
Okay, we might actually dig that up.
Podcast supercuts. Yeah. Always got time for that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, he is, that's, yeah, I mean, he's a ridiculous person. I believe one of his Republican colleagues once famously said that Ted Cruz could kill somebody, that somebody could kill Ted Cruz on the floor of the Senate. And if the trial was held in the Senate, nobody would convict him. So, he's apparently not well liked, is what I got out of that.
Who knows why? Some guys just can't get a break in life,
Yeah.
And that was probably before his unbelievably horrible beard, also.
What the hell? Let's do it.
Yeah, yay!
Some of y'all know I do every week a podcast. I do a podcast every week. I do a podcast 3 days a week. I do a podcast. Last year, I launched a podcast. 2 years ago, I launched a podcast. 3 years ago, I launched a podcast. I do a podcast, my last podcast, today's podcast on the podcast on my podcast.
Back to Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation hearing.
You know, a couple of years ago, I was doing my weekly podcast. My podcast. If you're a grifter, you got to grift. Podcast.
Oh my God, that's good use of that Edward Grieg composition is overused, but that's as a Norwegian American, I applaud that use of his work to satirize rotten Ted Cruz.
Yeah, it's a. I mean, look, I don't think that I'm nearly that good at promoting this podcast, and like, I don't know. I feel like I hope at least this one takes up more of my time, than Ted's does of his. I mean, I'm not actually holding down a U.S. Senate seat while I'm doing this.
Senate seats with like senior committee positions and shit. Yeah, seems like you should be too busy for booking guests, Ted. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. But in any case, let's get into this. So, this happened in 2017. What's the context of this? What are they arguing about here?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm full disclosure. I have only seen like a few clipped little highlights from this. I've never seen this debate, so I'll enjoy it live with everyone. As I recall, like I remember seeing this on the various links to it when we were trying to find a good file for this. Yeah, I think the nominal theme was that era's terrible Republican tax plan. I guess this must have been the era of the Trump tax cut, 2017. Mm-hmm. So maybe it kicks off on that. But as I recall, there's a few little side paths explored in the process of it. I don't think they felt too bound to the tax issue, which is great because as an economist, even I find taxes really fucking boring. So I wouldn't worry about them.
All right. Well, fair enough. Let's get moving.
From Washington, this is CNN's debate night with Senators Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz at issue. President Trump's new tax plan. Will Congress go for it? And how might it affect your wallet? I'm Ted Tapper.
And I'm Dana Bash. This morning, President Trump again promised his plan will be a boon to small businesses and the middle class. But President Trump's critics say the plan is a huge boost to the rich and might even raise taxes for some in the middle class.
Meanwhile, President Trump's Treasury Secretary is saying that the stock market, now at a record high, will drop if Congress does not cut taxes. Senator Cruz supports the president's effort to lower taxes. Senator Sanders opposes it.
Gentlemen, welcome. A reminder, you will get 90 seconds to answer questions from us and our audience, 45 seconds for responses and rebuttals. Senators, let's start with your opening arguments. You each have 1 minute. Senator Cruz, we'll start with you.
Dana, thank you. I want to thank CNN and Jake and Dana both for hosting this, everyone for coming out. And Bernie, thank you for joining us.
All right. Now, I do want to note that this is pre-beard, Ted.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah. I mean, we're all going to suffer a lot through this, so at least that we will not be subjected to. And I mean, why would you cover that face with a beard? I mean, it's just a loss that it happened.
Fair enough.
For a substantive debate on tax policy, several months ago, you and I did Obamacare. Now we're back with taxes, and I got to say, this debate is very, very simple. Bernie and the Democrats want every one of you watching today to pay more taxes. And Republicans want to lower the taxes for each and every person watching this debate. Now, tonight, I'm going to make a prediction. Bernie's going to suggest in just a few seconds that this is not really about you. This is about, quote, taxing the rich. That's what the Democrats always say. But here's what you need to know. Every time Bernie says the rich, What he means is taxpayers. And so if you pay taxes, he's talking about you. Now, how do we know this? We know this because there's a difference between facts and rhetoric. Bernie's tax plan cost over $13 trillion. That's what he's proposed raising in new taxes. And who pays for it? Well, the Democrats always talk about the millionaires and billionaires. But here's a simple fact. We could take every single person making $1 million a year or more and confiscate 100% of their income, everything they make, every penny. And it would raise about $1 trillion, about 8% of the cost of Bernie's tax plan. That means if you want tax revenue, you don't get it from the millionaires and billionaires. You get it from the middle class. You get it from the working men and women in this country. Tax cuts are about jobs and more money in your pocket, more money for the single mom to buy books for her kids, for the truck driver to be able to afford sending his daughter to college, for the family who's struggling to make ends meet to be able to save up and go to Disney World. This debate is very, very simple. Bernie and the Democrats want to raise your taxes, and the Republicans want to cut them so that you have more in your pocket.
Senator Cruz, thank you.
So when he says that thing about $13 trillion, what he's talking about is Bernie's Medicare for All proposal. And there are two things to note there. One is that Cruz is doing what people like him always like to do when they want to make something sound more expensive, like it's more expensive than it is, which
10-year bill.
Exactly. You do the cost over the course of the next 10 years so you can move the decimal point in place.
This so much money. Oh, my goodness.
And I've never understood why 10 years was like the sort of acceptable way to do this trick. I mean, it's like, come on, man, you could just go for broke. It'll cost 130 trillion over the next 100 years.
Yeah. It's just about moving in enough to terrorize innocent American social democrats away from supporting someone who actually would do one of their policies. Yeah, that is like,
and then of course, cost over the next millennium.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're going to comment on that millionaire income number there, which is
well. Okay, so the other thing I was going to say is that. So that's the first thing that that's not that's like. He's saying that in a way that would make any casual listener think that he's talking about the annual cost. He's talking about the cost over 10 years. That's the first thing. But the second thing is that since this is the cost specifically of Medicare for All, then, okay, sure. Was the plan for that going to mean that, you and I would pay taxes to pay for it? Yes, right, that's true. But any normal middle income taxpayer is probably currently paying for premiums and copays and deductibles, and of course
network limitations that catches a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, the out of network surprise bills. You needed to go. God forbid. You should have an emergency room now to visit. Outside of your network, right? Like.
Yeah. Right? Exactly.
Yeah. But even if that doesn't happen, right? Just the regular monthly, somebody who's not even sick, right? Just like, I got to pay these private health insurance premiums, all this stuff, right? The whole point of Medicare for All is to eliminate all of those costs and say, no, instead of this being something that, you as an individual consumer are paying for, we're all paying for together and then providing it, as the saying goes, to all. And everybody concluded, who looked at the numbers, concluded that it would actually save money for middle income taxpayers if they didn't have to pay for premiums and deductibles and all that shit, and they just had to pay like a tax in place of all of that. The Mercatus Center, it's a libertarian think tank. They did, infamously as Matt Brunig, found out, the Mercatus Institute report about this accidentally concluded that that Medicare for All would save a bunch of money.
Oops. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it makes sense. Yes, there's a tax. There's a tax, Ted. It's uh-oh. But, a fifth of your paycheck's coming back to you now because it's not this. It's very expensive private insurance, and it covers nothing, and you get all these fees and network limitations. It's amazing. So it's all like your incredibly sleazy fat neck Ted Cruz tricks. 10-year figure for the bill, then annual income for the rich people. Like that's an annual number he described for their income. Like their income, it's less than 1/10 of that. Yeah, because that's 1 year and it's 10 years for the other thing, you freaking chump. That beard so he could hide his shameful face from us. I'm already this debate was my idea, and I'm already annoyed at myself for putting myself on the hook to watch this much Ted Cruz. I will say I don't watch a lot of like politicians on video, like a lot of us article head freaks. I mostly like read it, and print it of stuff. So it's rare for me to see these people. So it's, of course, double-edged sword right now because I have to like confront Ted Cruz, which we've already commented on what, an ordeal that is. It's like viewing Cthulhu, But then you've got like sweet Bernie. Like I haven't seen Bernie on camera, I think maybe at all since the last campaign a couple years ago. It's all coming back to me now as he makes this like little sweet, thin-lipped smile while Ted Cruz is running him down with a bunch of fucking capitalist lies.
Yeah.
I
and that is really striking. Like just to circle and underline what you just said, the income from all of the wealth from the millionaires would only cover about 10% of the cost of 10 years. So, that's, I'm not saying we should literally take every cent from everybody who has $1 million, but in fact, what you just told me was that would just about cover it.
Yeah, these guys keep almost accidentally admitting it would be better. Like a single Twitter community note under them, and the whole thing would be gone. It's like, no, it's true. I bet Bernie's about to say like half this shit we're saying. You and I are probably like his two brain hemispheres right at the moment we've got a pause of here. This is probably close to what he's going to say. But predictable shit from the GOP.
Let's see what he says.
Senator Sanders.
Let me make a prediction. In 2 minutes, Senator Cruz is going to tell you that if we give tax breaks to the billionaires like George W. Bush did, like Ronald Reagan, then we're going to create zillions of jobs and you're all going to become very, very rich. That we have a trickle-down economic theory, tax breaks for the wealthiest people, the largest corporations, and whoa, everything is good. That is a totally fraudulent theory. Here is the reality of American society today. For 40 years, the middle class of this country, the great middle class, has been shrinking. And what we have seen is a massive transfer of wealth from working families to the top 0.1%, trillions in dollars, because of corporate greed and an unfair tax system. Now, the Trump Republican tax proposal that's before us today, this proposal is being pushed by Senator Cruz's campaign contributors, some of the wealthiest people in this country, by the Koch brothers who are worth $90 billion. Why are they pushing this agenda? Because 80% of the tax breaks in this proposal will go to the top 1%. In fact, 30% of the middle class will end up paying more in taxes. 40% of the tax benefits will go to the top 0.1%. This is massive tax breaks for the wealthy. And then the other thing they do in order to pay for their tax breaks, you know what they do? They cut Medicaid over a 10-year period by $1 trillion, throwing 15 million Americans off of the health insurance they have. They cut Medicare by $470 billion. So what this is, in fact, is a proposal, which is right on the floor of the Senate right now. Senator Cruz and I, going back tomorrow, we're going to continue the debate. It is a Robin Hood proposal in reverse. They're taking from the working families and the poor, and they're giving to the rich. It's a proposal that must be defeated.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Let's talk about some of the details now.
Well, this is why, Bernie bro is an insult. This is why Bernie has a problematic reputation. Like, it's cheap moves, like relying on the fact that his policies are popular and saying they're going to cut taxes and that's going to cause a deficit and they're going to cut your Medicare. And like, holy shit. And you see, Cruz makes the little, he goes like, he's like, you could see, just like it's a tiny little puckering. This is typical cheap move on Sanders' part, just exploiting the fact that people like what he says and don't like what Ted Cruz is. Cheap.
Yeah. No, this is why people deplore Bernie bros. Yeah, no, I mean, this is it's always interesting watching Bernie Sanders do this because because I'm a nerd, and what I want to see him do oftentimes is pause everything to tell you exactly what was wrong with the argument that Ted Cruz just made. And, don't get me wrong, he does a little bit of that sometimes, but Bernie's whole thing, I mean, the whole, I think basis of the fact that Bernie Sanders is the most effective left communicator we've had in the United States in a very long time is that he is just relentlessly, Terminator level disciplined about message. And so, yeah, I mean, look, you go, you go see him at a rally, you're going to hear about the millionaires and the billionaires and, how this is the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee healthcare as a right. And if he shows up to do a debate on taxes, he is going to start with the thing that he was planning to start by saying, right? I mean, the guy cannot be knocked off script. I mean, this was always like the funny thing about watching him at that, like, presidential debates, because people would be, I don't know, it's like 2016, be talking about like ISIS and, what's going on with in Syria.
Charlie Hebdo and so on.
Yeah, and and he would engage with that briefly, and then he would say that we need to break up the big banks and the millionaires and the billionaires, and because this is it's like, man, I mean, what do you want? Like, you go see Leonard Skinner, you're gonna hear Freebird.
I respect that, though. Like, it's so easy. I mean, the whole structure of this stuff is to knock you off course if you're saying things that aren't going to please the sponsors when we go to the break in a minute and a half. Being able, not being able to be knocked off course is, it's a strength. And there's so much of political debate is like, well, what do you think about what Trump said this morning? And you're like, they took all your money away. They're going to take away your health insurance. We should tax them. Like, it has those weaknesses, those strengths, even though people, will say like Bernie missed opportunities to broaden his coalition because he was so on message. He didn't want to, break off that, which is I don't know. It's an argument you could make, but that's the weakness of his strength, which is the message is keep that message front and center. He knows it's American media, and if you don't have a relatively concise message you keep in the center, everyone's going to forget it when the ad comes on.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's keep going.
Republicans are still working out a lot of the details of the tax plan, but the proposed framework would cut the corporate tax rate from 35% to 20% and reduce the number of individual tax brackets from 7 brackets to 3 brackets, creating 3 new rates of 12%, 25%, and 35%. I want to begin with the question of who this plan will benefit. We're going to bring in Kelsey Yarzob. She's a student at the George Washington University here in Washington. She has a question for Senator Cruz. Kelsey.
Senator Cruz, I come from a middle-class family, and I worked hard in high school to get into a competitive college. But even after academic scholarships, my parents and I are still struggling to afford my education, and that's without indirect costs. So it's hard then for families like mine to see the benefits of cutting corporate tax rates and reattempting trickle-down economics when that hasn't been a long-term solution for the middle class in the past. How would you justify cutting the corporate tax rate by 15%, but only barely making a dent in the tax rate for middle-class Americans?
Kelsey, thank you for your question, and congratulations on your studies. Look, I understand the frustration, and you know what? There are a lot of young people who feel frustrated. You've probably got student loans. I know when I was in college, I had about $100,000 in student loans, and wasn't sure how to pay for them because my parents had declared bankruptcy when I was in high school. So I understand that's hard. You asked why cut the corporate taxes for a young person. I'll give you the single best reason: because when you graduate, you want a job. Do you know the United States has the highest corporate tax rate of any developed country in the world? You look at countries all over Europe, you look at Ireland, you look at the United Kingdom, you look at France, they're cutting their tax rates. And what's happening is jobs are fleeing to those countries. Capital goes where it gets the right tax rate. And Bernie's solution is jack the taxes up even more. If you jack the taxes up even more, we've already got the highest corporate tax rates in the developed world. You'll see even more companies leaving, even more jobs leaving. And the frustration young people feel is you're coming out of school and you don't have opportunity. You know, Bernie talked a minute ago about the gap between rich and poor. He's right. It's growing, but it's grown dramatically under Barack Obama. Do you know that right now the top 1% have a higher share of our national income than any year since 1928? If you look at an article called The Greatest Wealth Transfer in History by Justin Gardner, New York Post editor, called the period between 2008 and 2015 the Great Fleecing. Those are the Obama years, because what happened? What happened is $4.5 trillion in wealth was accumulated in Wall Street, and that was with high Obama taxes, high Obama regulation, all the cronyism and favoritism of Washington. And the people that got hurt, the gap between rich and poor, widened more under Obama than under any other president. What I want to see is young people coming out with opportunity. And the way you have opportunity is to have 2, 3, 4, 5 job offers. When you cut taxes on small businesses and job creators, the result is everyone benefits because you have more opportunity, better jobs, and higher wages.
Senator Sanders?
Well, for a start,
All right. So I think that Senator Cruz made a really strong argument here that the gap between rich and poor increased dramatically under Barack Obama, despite the fact that Obama governed by implementing the entirety of the Bernie Sanders program. He created Medicare for all, free college.
I remember that day.
Card check for unions. I think he probably nationalized a bunch of stuff. That's it's been a few years. My memory is vague.
That's why YouTube is part of the Department of Interior. That's why we're using it right now. Because it's Obama. That's big government. Like, it doesn't go from like big to little government when the White House changes parties. It's like over time. You guys have been cutting taxes for 40 years. That's pretty great. It's under Obama. Like, it's Obama's fault. Like, okay, yes, finally, all right. There is a huge wealth gap that's built up over 30 years. Well, now there's a black guy. So,
well, it's also. I mean, it's also funny. I mean, he's debating Bernie Sanders, who, people, if you don't live in Vermont, and you knew who Bernie Sanders was before he ran for president. Now, I mean, I happen to know pretty early on because I think she was wrong about this, but my grandmother was like convinced that he was a distant cousin or something. But there was like a genealogical thing there. But other than that, right, as a normal person, if you knew, historical pop quiz here, if you knew who Bernie Sanders was before 2015, what most likely did you know him for?
Bernie Sanders before 2014.
Before he ran for president the first time.
Of course, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm thinking.
So
I mean, I don't know.
It's so specifically, he's when Bernie Sanders first came to national prominence in 2010 because of this filibuster he gave that was later published in a book called The Speech. And it was this big iconic, well, not early in the sense of early career. Bernie Sanders had already been in public life for like 300 years by that point, but like it was, this big iconic early in the, in terms of his national prominence, thing that in 2010, he did this. He did this filibuster because he was so mad because Obama had made this deal that he was trying to block with the Republicans to make the Bush tax cuts permanent.
Right on. That's fantastic. Just the thing you should be doing.
No, for sure. Right? But it's like, yeah, okay, fucking Obama. What's your point? Like, it's how do you think Obama governed? Like, Obama notoriously, filled his cabinet with like Goldman Sachs guys and, had
Chase Bank in there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, he was, Obama, like, okay, there's like Obamacare, which, is, better than nothing, but like it's also, it was also to a very great extent a giveaway to the big health insurance companies. And what else, right? Like he didn't fucking do anything. Like that's like, what's this like great radical leftist thing that Ted Cruz thinks Obama did to fuck up the economy?
Yeah, he's eager, like, from the beginning. Like, that's Bernie and the Democrats. Like, he's eager for there to be no daylight between, like, Barack Obama's, like, conservative policy using a Heritage Foundation Republican alternative to Medicare for All as Obamacare. Like, Obama's defining policy is the conservative alternative to Medicare for All. Like, that was how it was created. So it's amazing. This, like, it's just lazy bullshittery. Like, oh, that's so they're all the same, and wealth inequality is high. Don't look into Bush and Reagan and their tax policy. Remember, there is no moment prior to this exact moment now. Very important. Yeah, it's pretty great. But also, I'm appreciating what Luke Macri is saying in the comments here, because I was thinking the same thing. Like, Cruz goes on about, like, do you know that our taxes the corporate taxes are highest in the developed world, and other countries are cutting them, and our companies are going there, and we're not going to have any companies if we don't lower our tax rate. Like, his whole argument is, they have capital. He's a capital goes where it gets the right tax rate. He even went that far as to use that kind of term. Like, I think that you might conclude from that, we should constrain outsourcing in some ways, a condition of market access, or ensure that certain key industries remain, or have some kind of a fucking plan of any type for how we're going to manage all this. And his point is like, no, of course we need to propitiate them, and you want to have low taxes so that when you come out of work, he said you're going to have student loans. You're going to have student loans. And by the way, what the fuck is this $100,000 in student loans that Cruz says he had? So, like, all of law school was on there, and he put the Coke on the student loans. Like, that's a lot of money. And bear in mind, those would have been like 1990s dollars, too.
That's true.
Go further. For credit hours and for Coke, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, it is just amazing that Cruz's whole argument is, there's this race to the bottom, and what are you going to do? We better play.
Exactly. I want to win the race. We're losing the race. You're making us lose, Bernie. We're going to lose the race to the bottom. That's that's perfect, actually.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. And I mean, you're right. He has been, consistently throughout the little bit that we watched so far, like, his strategy is to pretend to see no difference whatsoever, which is funny because, my memory does stretch back to the 2016 campaign, and which had happened all of a year ago when this debate was happening, and famously centrist Democrats did not like Bernie Sanders very much, and in fact, on the subject of Obama, that it was like a Hillary line of attack during the 2016 campaign that Bernie had, said in like 2012 that like it would be good if somebody ran against Obama in the primary.
Indeed, he's right then. He's right now.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's like, what are these guys? I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, this is totally absurd. The way it's like, oh, the Democrats are always saying millionaires and billionaires. Like literally, you're quoting Bernie Sanders. Like what other Democrat talks that way?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. Like as the Democrats from the Clinton era onward, like became conservative, like in their way they're portrayed, like they're still the Social Democratic Party. They just turned their back on all of it over several decades. But it's like, well, that's he's one of them. Like he's what they used to be. Like Sanders is like the high watermark of the New Deal Democratic Party. Like it's like, yeah, they no longer do that because you're side one and you're a bunch of hysterics to recognize that. That's great. That is rich too. I forgot that Clinton was like, well, Bernie's not even a Democrat, and he said that someone should primary Obama. Like her campaign against Obama in 2008 was borderline white supremacist. Like it was all about how he can't win the white working class, and they kept sharing that picture of him wearing that African garb from that one event. Like Clinton's record on running against Obama is an amazing thing for her to bring up.
No, yeah, I remember. I mean, it is funny like how memory wiped that was right away. But yeah, I remember that in 2008 when. She was like, I guess depending on where you put the commas, it makes it slightly less horrifying, but it's like, it's pretty bad regardless. She had that famous quote about the, famous at the time, right? About her, her base is being hardworking white people. Wow,
I forgot that one. That's oh God, that's even better. Yeah.
Yeah.
White people.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's fascinating. Oxford comma, it matters.
Yeah. Hardworking people, white people, something like that. It's like, yeah, it didn't sound good.
Subtle.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like, I mean, it is actually really funny in general to think back to that race because if all of the Clinton lines of attack against Obama had been correct, the Obama years would have been so much better.
God, if we could only ever get the Democrat the Republicans say we're going to get, it just never happens.
Because it's like it was a big, because like it was a big thing that she was attacking Obama. I remember in 2008 because he said he would be willing to meet without preconditions with the leaders of the bad countries.
How dare you do that? That's oh God. It's a rich load there. So it's annoying when, that's the first step conservatives do. Okay, well, the most unflattering Democrats, that's all of you guys. That's all of you. God, just the details of this country's political system are such a drag. Great opportunity, though, to point out that it's exactly this kind of picture, this kind of still image that we have on screen right now that led Ted Cruz's consultant to say,
cover that up.
Hideous pube beard. Step up. Like that's a step up at this stage, Senator. I'm just, you pay me to tell you the truth.
Yeah. So it is also, I don't want to resume this without just hitting this point, that like to hear Ted Cruz talk, the range of options that you have to stop or reduce outsourcing is none. That literally the only response is just to give up and like grovel and give companies, try to win that race to the bottom.
It really is. Yeah. And he said as much. I mean, that's amazing. Like these guys, like if you're like that intellectually castrated, you can walk that close to the like power of capital truth and like, and carefully turn around and walk right back and say, and so we must, I, for one, welcome our insect overlords. It's just enough reality checks so that people will be like, well, he does sometimes say it like it is. I'm like, well, that is right. My boss, he says we're like a family there. We had a pizza party recently. Like, it's fascinating how this works. Cruz has been in it for years, so he's got like, his very practiced, awful way about him. But he was like very ready with all that. It's amazing.
Because she was like, hey, you're not actually going to do almost anything to my taxes, but like, you're lowering these taxes for corporations. And he was like, well, first of all, congratulations on that degree, and here's a personal story about me. And what were we talking about?
$100,000. That's a lot back then. What the fuck, Ted? I'm just interested. I'm curious,
So, okay, so just real quickly though, I do want to go back to this, just, people's economist mode here. If, assuming that the options are more than none at all, right? What are some of the things that Ted is neglecting here?
Well, I mean, sheesh, like there's lots of stuff you can do about capital mobility. I mean, the big thing that economists always say just about that broad issue, like how do you keep a company from closing up and going overseas? And the first thing is to recognize we passed like several large free trade deals to hugely grease the wheels on companies, investing overseas. Close down your domestic plant, sometimes physically move the machinery and capital over and build a new factory and produce there. So the first thing we could do would be stop greasing the fucking wheels on the process. Like that would be a good start. Senator Cruz, you voted for a lot of these. Second thing though is like the Western world, like for all of the discussion of the rise of China and all this stuff, like the Western world still consumes the gigantic majority of the global economy. If the United States and Europe come together and say, we're doing a new global minimum corporate tax regime, so there's no benefit to companies from moving overseas, and we're going to have a minimal regulatory structure to like cut down on these tax shelters and avoid regulatory arbitrage. Like Japan always goes along with the historic Western nations on there. China and like Russia usually just mirror our energy on all this shit. Like we easily, if the Western world somehow had a political movement that could move, national policy on this, it's extremely achievable to conceive of reining in like these giant mobile corporations. I mean, it's entirely based on a regulatory framework that completely relies on what the big economies do. Little countries in the developing world try to like pass this stuff all the time, but if it's just you and Angola doing it, there's not much. If America, European Union, Japan, like if you get a bunch of them together, they'll go like, all right, this is a fait accompli. It's the new cost of doing business. That's sort of what happened in the 40s with Bretton Woods, was gestures in that direction to channel money into investment in those national economies, at least for those first few decades after World War II. That's like policy options exist. Or we could fucking nationalize some of these things, and then I don't think anyone's going to vote to outsource their own job. So even better options there. But all of this, it's, they're going to go where the tax is low. So we've just got to tax them until they just get all of our clothes.
Yeah,
or
we just have to get to the point where we just give up everything. Like we have, we really need to prove that we are willing to hurt ourselves to appease them, just to the point that you're, like the nanny in The Omen, jumping out the window, hanging herself, all for you, Damien.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What can we do? Recruit others to toil underground in their below earth sugar mines. Like that is just the description there, I feel like. Yeah.
I commiserate with you as a student struggling. And what you should know is that in order to give incredible tax breaks to the 1%, the Republican budget that we're debating right now would slash Pell Grant funding. Pell Grants are the major source of federal help for working class young people. It would slash that funding, if you could believe it. At a time when so many young people are struggling to figure out how they're going to go to college, these guys want to cut Pell Grants by $100 billion. They want to cut housing assistance all over this country. You're a young person. You're thinking of getting an apartment, getting a house. We have millions of people who are spending 40, 50% of their limited incomes on housing. They want to cut Section 8 housing and other housing programs by $37 billion. So what this entire proposal is about is to give tax breaks to people who don't need it. And you do that by making massive cuts in education, in healthcare, in housing, in the programs that working families desperately need.
Senator Cruz, you want to respond?
I do. It's interesting. In his opening, Bernie invoked Robin Hood. And I got to say, I think Bernie fundamentally misunderstood that story. Robin Hood was robbing the tax collectors who were collecting too much taxes from the working men and women and taking it for the rich. In Bernie's analogy, it is the Democrats who are King John and the Sheriff of Nottingham. And Robin Hood is saying, tax collectors, stop hammering people who are struggling, who are laboring in the fields, who are working. Stop taking it to the castle to give out to your buddies. You notice Bernie's going to tell you all this free stuff he's going to give. And the Democrats love corporate welfare. They love to rail on the insurance companies. What they won't tell you is that under Obamacare, the profits for the insurance companies doubled. When you have Washington giving out goodies, the big guys do great. It's the little people who hurt. It's the young people. It's the entrepreneurs. Look, when my dad came to America from Cuba, he couldn't speak English. He was washing dishes. He was making 50 cents an hour. Our economy has been the place where people can come and do that. And it doesn't work. You notice, Bernie didn't disagree with what I said, that the gap between rich and poor has increased more under Obama than any president in history.
It's increased significantly over the last 40 years under Republican
how about the
presidents,
last
and
8?
under it did increase under Obama, and it did increase under Bush. Under the Bush proposal, and remember what Senator Cruz is talking about, if we give tax breaks, we're going to create all these jobs, we're going to have all this growth, and we're going to have a surplus and so forth and so on. Under President Bush, he did it. He gave tax breaks, and you know what happened? He gave tax breaks to the rich. And you know what happened? We lost 500,000 private sector jobs, and the national debt almost doubled under Bush. Now, here is the most important point tonight. Really, it has nothing to do with taxes. It has something to do, everything to do, with campaign finance reform. And I want all of you to ask yourself a very simple question. Why do you think the Koch brothers and Ted Cruz's major donors, billionaires, are supporting these proposals? Do you think they're staying up nights worrying about working families? Do you think they're worried about kids who can't afford to go to college? Do you think they're worried about elderly people who can't keep their homes warm in the wintertime? They are not. You got one group of people, the Koch brothers, two people, worth over $95 billion. They are going to spend $300 million alone in this campaign cycle to do what? To pass legislation that protects the interest of the wealthy and the powerful, and to support candidates like Senator Cruz who will do just that. So when you think about politics, always ask the question, who is behind this agenda? There was an article, front page, Boston Globe the other day. It said, the Koch brothers want this tax reform. And you know what the article said? And Ted actually, I think, was at a meeting with the Koch brothers the other day. Was that right?
Indeed.
Yes. And what you may have heard this guy say, if you don't get your act together for the billionaire class, you know what they're going to do? They're going to cut your funding, Ted. You're going to be in trouble. So we used to think that what Congress was about is representing the middle class and working families of the country. Unfortunately, as a result of Citizens United, we have a corrupt campaign finance system. What this legislation is about is not for the working families of this country, no matter what Senator Cruz may say. What this legislation is about is to benefit the wealthy and the powerful and those who make large campaign contributions.
Senator Cruz, I want to give you a chance to respond, and then I do want to get to another citizen.
You know, there's a pattern you see of Democrats, which is they try to scaremonger. And so their latest villain is the Koch brothers. And they say this money in politics is what it's all about. But, you know, John Adams said, facts are stubborn things. Here's some facts. You look at 2014. In 2014, of the top 20 groups that gave money to politics, I guess listening to Bernie, they were all Republican. No, that's not the case. 16 of the top 20 gave primarily to Democrats.
Yeah. Bernie Sanders notoriously doesn't think that Democrats get any money from rich people.
Yeah.
Anybody
Really?
who's watching the 2016 campaign, that's one of the main things they would have gotten out of it. That, you know, Bernie,
Yes.
Bernie thinks there's no issue at all about the Democratic side with this.
Yeah, I remember him saying, get the money out of Republican politics. I'm sure is what he said. No, I'm remembering that, right? Yes. He said, out of that party. My party is great. That's why I'm an independent. Bernie should go, this stands for independent, dum-dum. That's what you do. This is why I don't write his material. I don't have the skill.
Fair enough.
The top 6, Act Blue, Tom Steyer, the Carpenters and Joiners Union, the City of New York, the Democratic Governors Association, the NEA, gave almost exclusively to Democrats. Where did these mysterious Koch brothers fall on the list? Number 59. So they do a good job. Look, Democrats do great with rich people. In the last 8 years under Obama, rich people got richer. You know, the most stunning thing Bernie said is, gosh, Republicans don't care about young people or old people or people struggling. That is malarkey, Bernie. And the young people aren't able to get jobs. The people like my dad, the struggling immigrants washing dishes, have lost their jobs because of the taxes and regulations from Obama. And you're proposing more taxes, more regulation without acknowledging what we're doing isn't
I
working.
don't think that's why they lost their jobs. They lost their jobs because, among other things, we have a corporate world who are prepared to shut down tens of thousands of factories in this country to move to China, to move to Mexico, to move to other low-wage countries.
So if you raise their taxes, do they do more of that? Or
They,
less?
believe me, their taxes right now, you made a statement a moment ago about how highly taxed corporations are. We have the highest corporate taxes in the world. Is that what you said?
It's,
Well, it's
in
wrong.
the developed world.
In the developed one, well, it's wrong. Nominally, it's 35%. But in effective tax rates, it is 14%. Very few global corporations pay 35%. According to the GAO, the average tax rate is about 14%, which puts us in the middle of the global economy. Bottom line here, though, is where Ted is right. We need to create millions of decent paying jobs. And the American people are going to have to make a choice. Do you want to give $1.9 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%, or do you think it makes more sense to invest $1 trillion rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our wastewater plants, our water systems? And doing that, we can create 15 million jobs.
Senators, we want to get to somebody who wants to create those jobs, and that is John Conrad, who supports President Trump and runs a trucking company in Pennsylvania. He has a question for you, Senator Sanders.
Yeah.
Senator Sanders, over my lifetime, all we've seen is more government and more expenses, cutting taxes from top to bottom or bottom to top, however you view it. Then we'll give some relief to the burdensome expenses all Americans face. Why would you not want a tax cut across the board for all Americans?
Well, I do want a tax cut for the middle class and working families. But when the top 0.1% now owns as much wealth as the bottom 90%, when you have a handful of people with incredible wealth and power, no, I'm afraid that I will not support tax breaks for billionaires. Now, I don't know if you were there when President Trump, were you there when President Trump came to Pennsylvania?
I was.
Yeah. And President Trump was touting, as I understand it, the repeal of the estate tax, something that Senator Cruz supports. That's why he was there, correct? Let's talk about the repeal of the estate tax. The only people who benefit from that are the top 0.2%. 99.8% of the people do not pay a nickel in estate taxes. Senator Cruz will tell you about all the farmers and the ranchers. Well, Ted, there are 80 of them in the United States. The overwhelming majority of beneficiaries of this estate tax that Trump was supporting are people like the Walton family. Do you really believe that the wealthiest family in America should get a tax break of up to $50 billion, that the Koch brothers should get a tax break of up to $30 billion? Do you think that makes sense?
I did say all Americans.
Well, do you think that the wealthy should not get tax breaks?
I did say all Americans.
Okay, well, I happen not to believe that the Koch brothers need a tax break.
Senator Cruz?
Well, let me say a couple of things. One, Bernie once again said, oh, look, it's the super rich that we're going to pay the taxes. It's the top 0.1%, the millionaires and billionaires. You notice Bernie hasn't responded to the simple fact that if we confiscate 100% of the income of everyone making over $1 million, it produces about $1 trillion. Where does Bernie get the other $12 trillion that he's raising taxes? It comes from the middle class. And by the way, if you confiscate 100% of a person's income, the next year they're not going to work or produce it if you're going to take 100%. But let's take what Bernie just brought up now, the death tax. I think the death tax is one of them. No, it's the death tax because it kicks in when you die. You paid taxes your whole life.
No, your family pays it, yeah.
Then when you die, you see two people, the undertaker and the tax man.
No,
that's not fair. Well, and let me point out, you know, again, the rhetoric behind the estate tax is, oh, this is all about the rich guys. You know, the George Soroses of the world, don't pay estate tax. They have armies of lawyers and accountants. They do all sorts of trusts and generation skipping. They don't pay it. The people who pay the death tax are farmers, they're ranchers, they're small business owners. Now, Bernie said a minute ago, oh, there are only 80. You know, there might be 80 in Vermont. But those facts are not right. And let me give some real facts. According to the U.S. Agriculture Census, there were 3.2 million farmers in America. 13% of the estates subject to the estate tax included farms. 1/3 of all farmers are over 65. And if you look at from 1995 to 2016, 102,000 closely held businesses and 36,000 farms paid the death tax. What does that mean? That means a family farm, when the farmer passes away and his or her kids inherit the farm, so often the first thing they have to do is sell the farm or take out big debts. A small business, if you've got a factory in a town and you've got equipment that is employing, that has workers working, and the owner of that small business dies under the death tax, the small business owner doesn't have the fancy lawyers and accountants that George Soros has. So the small business owner ends up having the kids sell the business and end up having to fire the workers. It's not fair. Let me just say,
no, we're staying on the subject. I just want to introduce you to somebody who wants to talk about the federal estate tax, which, as you've noted, currently only applies to inheritances worth more than $5.5 million. We're sticking with this issue. I just want to bring somebody.
Can I just say something? Then
we're coming right to you after Senator Cruz.
Okay.
I just want to bring in somebody who actually wants to talk about this specific issue. Scott Nash. He's the CEO of Mom's Organic Market. He has a question for Senator Cruz, and then I promise Senator Sanders will go right to you after that.
Okay.
I started a grocery company with $100 out of my mother's garage, and I now employ more than 1,000 people. I am extremely grateful that I now qualify for the estate tax. I learned from my parents that each of us needs to help those in need while pulling our own fair share. And I teach my children those same values. I believe that leaving everything to my kids would deny them the opportunity to gain self-esteem, satisfaction, and personal growth that comes from hard work and accomplishing goals. So why should my children, or the children of any wealthy person, inherit millions of tax-free dollars while other Americans have to pay taxes on the money they actually earn?
Well, let me congratulate you on your business success. And I'm starting the business, Moms, you said you called it. I'm glad it's going well. You know, to be honest, the death tax is, at the end of the day, it's not about you or your kids. It's about the 1,000 workers you said you employ. And if you don't want to hand the business over to your kids, if you want to shut it down and lay those workers off, that's your choice. If you want to give the money to charity, God bless you. That is a wonderful thing to do. But I'll tell you, it's a terrible thing for those workers who are relying on that paycheck to feed their kids, to pay their mortgage. What the death tax does is other business owners like you, when they pass the business on, the simple fact that you died means you've got a massive tax bill that the only way to pay for it is to lay those people off. You know, the first question that was asked about as a young person, why should I care? A young person may be saying, well, gosh, the death tax, you know, when you're 19 or 20, you think you're going to live forever. Why do I care about the death tax? Well, you care about it if you want to be one of those 1,000 employees, if you want to have an opportunity to grow in a small business, and small businesses provide 2/3 of all new jobs. I'll tell you, I spent a lot of time in West Texas in the agriculture community, and Bernie's suggestion that farmers and ranchers don't care about the death tax, it is nonsensical. I have sat with farmer after farmer after farmer that has a lot of land. So under Bernie's definition, they're rich. They've got a lot of land, and they go broke every year planning and paying people's salaries and barely making ends meet, and yet the death tax would make them sell their farm. That's not fair, and it's not right.
That's a good speech.
Thank
but
you.
It has nothing to do with reality.
I appreciate that.
Here's the reality. You know, after Trump and people like Senator Cruz go around saying, oh, it's mostly the workers and the farmers and the ranchers who are going to pay the estate tax, Steve Mnuchin, who is our Secretary of Treasury, this is what he said, and I quote, obviously, the estate tax, I will concede, disproportionately helps rich people. Yeah, it helps rich people, the top 0.2%. 99.8% of families of somebody who died do not pay a nickel in the estate tax. Factcheck.org said, quote, Less than 1% of farm operators, less than 1% of farm operator estates is projected to pay any estate tax. Tax Policy Center said, quote, only an estimated 80 small farmers will pay any estate tax in 2017. Center on Budget and Policy Priorities said only the wealthiest 0.2% will pay estate tax. Here's who the beneficiaries are. And this is why the Koch brothers are spending so much money to see this legislation passed. Their family will benefit to the tune of some $30 billion. So spending a few $100 million to elect people like Senator Cruz is pocket change. If you're going to, a family is going to get 30 billion. If you are the Walton family, the wealthiest family in the country, you will get up to $50 billion. So this is an incredible boondoggle going to the top 0.2%, $269 billion going to the top 0.2%. You know what I think? We had a young lady coming up here talking about the cost of college. I think it makes a lot more sense for us to make public colleges and universities tuition free and lower student debt rather than give the Walton family up to $50 billion in tax breaks.
So the moderator said earlier at this point they were having the debate in 2017. The estate tax didn't kick in for estates that were valued at less than $5.5 million. I think at that point. Just looked it up. You know what it is now? It's 12.92 million. So if you die and you leave your kids a measly $12.91 million estate, that's 100% tax free. It's only the hardworking ranchers, who have $12.92 million estates for whom, their kids are, have to pay some taxes on some of it.
Yeah, that's great. It's just, this is big government. It's just coming down on small millionaires. Like it's dreadful. Like Ted Cruz, he doesn't say the word business without small in front, just no matter what. New small businesses create 2/3 of all jobs. It's actually only 1/4 of all jobs, but all the new ones come there because they come in and out of business nonstop. Like lots of fun little smushy shit there.
Yeah.
But I will say I like I like that they got into the death tax. Bernie at least pushed back on the death tax. Everyone dies. 0.2% pay the estate tax. So that's what one out of
Yeah,
so one out of 500,
really,
I guess.
It's like just a little bit cucked to even go with estate tax because you're right, Ted. Estate tax, I think that doesn't necessarily conjure anything up. That's like a lot of people might be a little unclear when they hear that what that means.
A large estate. Do I know what that is?
Yeah, inheritance tax, right? That's what you're not taxing the person who died. You're taxing the person who is inheriting their stuff. Right. The tax doesn't happen. It's not triggered by the death. It's triggered by the inheritance. Right. That's an
inheritance. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Like you said, if you give it all away, then there's no estate tax because there's no estate. You're putting it into some trust or something for a foundation or whatever other thing you're doing. Like that's pretty rich. And I do also enjoy just a minute ago, Cruz is really showing. As I recall, I read that he did debate. In high school or college, there's some of that $100,000 right there flying to all those debate events. That's probably where some of that student loan money went. But he's like, he's doing the debate, going fast. Don't really let the other person have a brief pause where they can break in and say something. As we've seen on many episodes of the show, Ben, remember, the first lesson of right-wing debating, why would you let the other side talk? They're just going to say a bunch of things you don't agree with. Don't let them talk. You just talk all the time. That's very handy.
Oh my God! I almost forgot about the Robin Hood thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was getting to next here. Yeah, it's he technically was not. He actually robbed the taxpayer. You got him with his own metaphor. That's well, I was Bernie. No, he fucked up that Robin Hood metaphor. Oh, Donald Trump. That's better. I also don't know why every fucking questioner has to be a petty bourgeois business owner. I don't know why. It's very CNN, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. But yeah, it's also I mean, look, it's Robin Hood is a story that takes place a long time ago, and we had an entirely different mode of production. But if you are going to do analogies to now, it would make at least as much sense to talk about that, to talk about that as rent, the taxes.
Yeah, and yeah, indeed. And I think back to like, oh, that's when we had a monarch. What did you conservatives think about that then? You were probably like, oh, down with monarchs, I guess, since you're against that, right? That's probably what Edmund Burke's famous for saying is hooray for the French Revolution, I bet. Conservative, is that right? Yeah, pretty rich. Yeah, he ain't called Lion Ted for no reason, says one of your commenters. That's very funny too. It's never forget that one.
Senator Cruz?
Let me say a couple of things. First of all, you notice Bernie didn't say a word in response to my point that 2014 of the top 20 political givers, 16 of them gave to Democrats. And I will note, in 2016, I listened to a certain candidate, a senator from Vermont, rail against Hillary Clinton for being captive to all the millionaires and billionaires that have funded the Democratic Party. So I agree. And listen, I will note, your campaign, like mine, were funded predominantly by grassroots voters. You had a ton
I did not get money from a super PAC funded by billionaires, Ted. You did. Well, I did not.
What I did receive was 1.8 billion contributions all across the country.
Contributions.
Million. We talk billions and trillions. These numbers start. 1.8 million contributions. Look, there is power to grassroots campaigns, and both of our campaigns enjoyed that. But the modern Democratic Party, of which you are today one of the leading voices and leading faces, you and Elizabeth Warren represent the heart of the Democratic Party. And that Democratic Party is captive to the special interest in Washington, to the billionaires. George Soros, Tom Steyer, yes, they're billionaires. And they give massive amounts.
And the Koch brothers are just low-wage workers who are struggling to feed their families with their $95 billion in personal wealth.
Bernie, by the way, let's be clear. Most of the billionaires on the Republican side were not with me in this race. They were with other candidates also. Because, listen, you and I have agreed on one thing for a long time, which is Washington is corrupt. But let me ask you something. If Washington is corrupt, if both parties are in on favoring giant corporations and big business and big labor and all the people with power, where Bernie and I disagree is the solution. If Washington's corrupt, why would you want to give more power to Washington? Under all of these high taxes and regulations, the working class, the young, women are doing worse. And you're saying, keep on with the policies that aren't working.
No, not quite.
Oh, make them worse. Make them worse.
Okay. Well, let's do two things.
Yeah.
Ted, number one, you ran a good campaign.
Thank you. You did too.
You were the guy who, Trump won, and you were right behind him, and I applaud you for that. But let's not confuse our campaigns. I did not have a super PAC. I did not have billionaires contributing millions of dollars into that super PAC. I never had a super PAC. I don't want a super PAC, and I'm damn proud that my average contribution was $27 from over 2 million people. That's number one. Number two, you're playing games here with words when you talk about the Koch brothers or whatever it was, 69th or so forth and so on. Of course, unions contribute, but there are millions of people in a union. The Koch brothers are two people. So if the NEA, which is the teachers union, which has, I suspect, millions of members, makes a contribution, I think.
How much money does Tom Steyer give?
Tom gives a lot, as a matter of fact. That's $1 billion. Yes, he does. Absolutely. Yeah. Look, and I'm not
and
here.
Soros?
Yes, he does.
Okay, just
all right. Well, believe me. All right. And that's why, Ted, I want your support for campaign finance reform, which will say to any billionaire, Democrat or Republican, they can't buy elections.
Senators,
your solution is always more government power.
No.
Okay, guys.
My solution is more freedom and less government.
We're on to a good issue here.
Let's steer it back to tax reform.
Senators, you both just said what we're going to maybe do in our next debate. Let's focus on the legislation that is before the United States Senate. You are two members of the Senate. We appreciated the walk down memory lane, but let's focus on taxes. President Trump has championed the Republican plan as a win for small businesses. The proposal would cut the top tax rate for small business owners, from 39.6% to 25%. I want to bring in Mark Hagar. He owns Prentice Products, a specialty graphics company in Indiana, and has a question for Senator Sanders. Mark?
Senator Sanders, you've characterized this plan as bad policy, disastrous, and morally repugnant.
Yes. Matter of fact, I did.
One element of this.
That's that's nice. That's like the meme, with the yes Chad. Yes.
Oh God, I got my man from my former great state of Indiana here. This is you're seeing right here, viewers. You're seeing every employer in Indiana. Just to throw that in real fast here. Yeah, pretty rich. So amazing how shameless Cruz is. It's like, oh, the Democrats, they're the party of big business, and all the current policies, which of course are neoliberal, they're the opposite of what Sanders wants. Like, this is like, it would be to Sanders' benefit a little bit just to remember that 30 years ago both parties took a big turn to the right, and yeah, the billionaires fund both of them, and Cruz can keep bringing up the two Democratic billionaires that people have heard of. People are saying in the comments that maybe Bernie being so on message makes it easier for Cruz to keep repeating this, saying he won't respond to my funny word puzzle riddle earlier. Like, that's, we always talk about debate technique on this show. Like, you want to stay on message, but you do need enough flex to deflect idiotic things, especially when they come up more than once. Like, you could argue that could be one area where Bernie could improve, I suppose.
No, I think so. Although I did like the point about the NEA very much, right? That like the
mass organization.
Yeah, a mass organization spending a lot of money, right? I mean, this is okay. You have a giant number of people who can like elect the people who are deciding how to spend it, etc. So that is a whole bunch of ordinary people getting together to collectively act politically, as opposed to literally a couple of guys who have to consult nobody. And this is just their money to do with what they want, right? It's I think it's pretty obvious that Cruz's deflection here is silly. That it's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, there are also Democratic billionaires. It's like, well, as you yourself pointed out, Bernie spent all of 2016 talking about the Democratic billionaires.
Yeah, like, it's just so, this is why Cruz has, succeeded and why his type are so successful. Like, you just have to maintain this lie long enough for this thing, and then you can put it down. Like, it's just about getting through this moment. And that's why, like, these guys, like, often shy away from, like, longer format exchanges like this, because it gets harder and harder to, like, keep all the context that discredits what you're saying out. Although it does help, people are still saying, yes, when it's the CNN format with our next questioner is Eric Bumlord, who runs a waste incinerator in Peoria, Illinois. Like, just...
Yeah.
How about, look, Cruz mentioned a single mother. How about a single mother? Like, can we get a little... I'm fine to have the small business owners, but Jesus Christ, like, let's let the format breathe a little, CNN. Give me a break.
Yeah.
This plan calls for a reduction in the tax rate for small businesses like mine, who are already taxed at a higher rate than our corporate counterparts. Can you clarify for me how that's disastrous or bad policy or repugnant?
But here's the point, Mark, and you make a good point. Small businesses are struggling with federal, state, local taxes. I got it. And we want to help small businesses. But Mark, what this particular bill does, as I mentioned earlier, 80% of the benefits go to the top 1%, not to you, not to small businesses. And 269 billion go to the top 0.2%. So we come together in a bipartisan way and say we need to help small business. Yeah, I think you do need help, and I'm there for you. But please, as a nation, we've got to look at your issues as a small business person in a different way than we look at the needs or the so-called needs of the Koch brothers and billionaires. Does that make sense to you?
Sure.
Senator Cruz?
It's interesting. Bernie said he's there for small businesses. And yet what he means by that is he's happy for you and anyone else to get a government check. But you notice he didn't talk about any taxes that he would cut. So when it comes to taxes, it's interesting. So Bernie, you focus a lot on the death tax. I get that you like the death tax. All right, fine. You and I disagree.
I like the estate tax? No. I don't want to see it repealed. That's
okay.
For sure.
All right. So we disagree on that. But how about some of the other elements of the framework that have been put out? Because, it's interesting. You're not for cutting any taxes. You're for raising everybody's taxes. So let me ask you some of the elements. One of the elements that's put out is doubling the standard deduction. So for individuals, the first $12,000 you earn, you pay zero. For a couple, the first $24,000 you earn, pay zero. Now, are you for that or against that? Because you keep telling us what you're against. Or do you agree with any aspect of cutting taxes?
Yep, but I don't.
So you would double the standard deduction?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think it'll help working class families.
All
But
right.
what I am not for, Ted, is repealing the individual exemption. Because what that will mean, if you have a large family, you got 2 kids, right?
I do.
And if, you know, a family of 2, 3, 4 kids, you know what? They're going to end up paying more in taxes. So I want to get rid of that part of it.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, but you would agree that increasing the standard deduction, letting a married couple pay zero taxes on their first $24,000 of income, that helps working class Americans. Would you agree with that component?
Yep, I would.
Okay, good. All right, we found some common ground. This is it is a miraculous night. All right, let's take a second element. An element, the gentleman that just asked the question, who's a small business owner, you said you're with him, you've got his back. One of the elements is cutting the tax rate for small business owners to 25% instead of being at 39.6%. Would you agree with cutting the taxes for small business owners to 25% so that he can hire more workers?
But you can't look at it this and that. You got to look at it in a comprehensive way. Ted, will you, before we talk about the small business guy, will you agree with me that it makes no sense to lower the tax rates of the highest income people in this country?
I don't agree with that, but answer.
You have to look at this. Would you agree with me that thousands of people will die if we cut Medicaid by $1 trillion and throw 15 million people off of the health insurance that they have? And that's not Bernie Sanders. That's a number of studies saying that. So to answer your question, if the question is, should we support small businesses and low-income people? The answer is, of course we should. That's the kind of tax reform we should do. I don't want to write them a check. We can lower taxes. But what you are doing is saying we're going to help a lower income person here, a small businessman over here, but we're going to tie it to the fact that 80% of the benefits are going to the top 1%. Work with me on a tax proposal where 80% of the benefits go to the working class and middle class of this country.
But you know,
work with me on that?
Bernie, as you... As you shared, Bernie, you and I both ran presidential campaigns. We both laid out our own tax plans. And so you don't have to ask hypothetically, gosh, what tax plan might I support? Because you campaigned on one. And the tax plan that you campaigned on was a $13 trillion tax increase. You didn't cut taxes on small business when you had the chance. You jacked them up. You didn't cut taxes. You didn't increase the standard deduction. You didn't actually, because your view is tax everyone, tax them like crazy, tax them at levels we've never seen, and then the government can send you a check on the back end. So when my tax plan, the tax plan I campaigned on was a simple flat tax of 10% for individuals and families, a business flat tax of 16%, which would be the tax you would pay, sir, in your small business, and we abolish every other federal tax. And it benefited every American. It increased every American's after-tax income by at least 14%, from the very poorest to the very wealthiest. That is what's happened when you get jobs and economic growth.
I just wanted to be clear. Was this the same exact tax plan that in 2015, the Wall Street Journal headline said, quote, Ted Cruz's new tax plan delivers its biggest benefits to the top 1% of U.S. households, adding about 1/3 to their after-tax income. Is that the plan we are talking about, Ted?
And look, I don't remember, but the Journal had lots of editorials criticizing me.
Of course they did, because you're going to drive up the deficit.
No, wait a second. I thought Republicans were the candidate of big business. Why was the Wall Street Journal criticizing me?
Oh, the Wall Street Journal has some very good reporters. Their editorial page is a little bit
But that's who you were quoting was their editorial page.
No, this was a headline. No. It's a headline, not from their editorial page. The point is, look. The point is, do we need tax reform? Sure we do. It's a complicated system.
What positive are you in favor?
Sure. In general, this is my view. Number one, we help the people who are hurting. You do not help the people who are doing phenomenally well. Corporate profits today, Ted, as you may know, are at an all-time high. We have large multinational corporations who in a given year don't pay a nickel in federal taxes.
Absolutely, and that's
all right,
wrong.
good. All right, yeah, we'll work on that. But we
And that
can
got
work
worse under
on
Obama.
tax reform, which puts money into the hands of working people, not into your billionaire friends.
So I want to turn to another taxpayer here. Republicans are proposing the elimination of something that's called SALT, which stands for state and local tax deduction. It currently allows Americans to deduct their income and property taxes on their federal returns. I want to bring in Andrea Nikashir. She's an assistant professor at Buffalo State University. She's a mother of 3 boys, and she has a question for Senator Cruz. Andrea.
That's not a
Senator
business.
Cruz, while I do not mind paying the state taxes required to make New York one of the best states in the country, I've come to rely on that SALT, state and local tax deduction. And it's actually been on the books since income tax code was invented in 1913. It seems to me that many GOP senators from red states are deliberately trying to punish blue Democratic states by removing the SALT deduction, which benefits higher tax states. To me, this seems both unethical and bad policy. So my question for you is, why would a middle-class working mom like myself support taking away the middle-class SALT deduction so that the wealthy Americans like you can get more money? Thank you.
Well, Andrea, thank you for your question. Thank you for being here. Let me make a couple of points. Number one, I agree with you. The objective of tax reform should be cutting everyone's taxes, cutting people's taxes in blue states, cutting people's taxes in red states. And if we don't do that, we've done something wrong. That's what I'm urging in Congress, that we should cut everybody's taxes. You're a mom with 3 kids. We need to be cutting your taxes. Now, I'll tell you, the state and local tax deduction is taken overwhelmingly by those earning $200,000 a year or more. It's those who are itemizing their taxes. It tends to be the wealthy. Now, I favor eliminating that deduction. Why? Because I don't think the federal government should be incentivizing states and local governments to jack up their taxes. But let me give a big caveat. I wouldn't favor eliminating that deduction unless we are lowering the tax rate enough that people in New York State, that people in Orange County, California, are paying less in total taxes. They're not deducting their state and local taxes, but the rate's a lot lower, so the check they're writing at the end of the day is smaller. And I will say, it's interesting you bring up New York. People vote with their feet. High taxes, what Bernie and the Democrats envisioning, jacking up taxes, we see it state by state. If you look at the 10 states with the highest tax rates, they have all seen, or virtually all seen, 9 of the 10 have seen population fleeing. Of the 10 highest states with tax burden, and New York is number 1, sadly, 240,000 people left those 10 states in 2015. And of the 10 states with the lowest tax burden, saw a net influx of 100,000 people in 2015. People are voting with their feet, and it's a combination of things. Number one, people are tired of sending more and more of their paycheck to the government. But number two, the high taxes and high regulations are killing jobs. The reason why you see people coming from high tax states to low tax states is in a state like Texas, where we have low taxes, there are jobs. Jobs are plentiful. Young people have opportunity coming out. And so I agree we should lower taxes for everyone, but we see state by state an illustration of how what Bernie and the Democrats are proposing doesn't work, and people vote with their feet every single day.
Senator Sanders?
First of all, let's be clear that at a time when Senator Cruz is fighting to provide 80% of the benefits to the top 1%, 30% of the middle class, because of the point that you raised, are going to be paying more in taxes. So I do not believe that everybody deserves a tax break. As I mentioned earlier, the former president from your state, George W. Bush, he gave very large tax breaks to the wealthy in corporate America. We lost 500,000 private sector jobs, and the national deficit soared. So this idea is of giving tax breaks to large corporations is basically a fraud. Listen to what Ronald Reagan's domestic policy advisor, Bruce Bartlett, said. He said that virtually what every Republican says about taxes today is a lie. Reagan's OMB director, David Stockman, said that the idea that closing loopholes and adding growth will pay for trillions in cuts, quote, is just completely fanciful and irresponsible. The people in the Reagan administration understand that when you give huge tax breaks to very, very wealthy people, the loss of revenue is not made up by economic growth. It's a fraudulent theory developed by the wealthy people. Just coincidentally, big money think tanks think it's a great job, great idea to give tax breaks to the wealthy. Isn't that a great surprise? I happen to believe that if you want to really get the economy moving, you do things like raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, put money into the hands of working people, provide targeted tax breaks to small businesses and working people, rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, creating 15 million jobs. When you make public colleges and universities tuition free, millions of people will now have the opportunity to go out and get the decent paying jobs that are being created today that today they can't get. And when we do what every other major country on earth does, and finally acknowledge that healthcare is a right of all people and not a privilege, by passing a Medicare for all single payer system, this will not only help working people all over this country, it will help small businesses who no longer have to spend half their lives figuring out how they're going to pay for the health insurance their workers need.
Senator Cruz, I just want to follow up, if I can, for 1 second about the state and local tax deduction, about SALT, because a study from the Government Finance Officers Association found that 28 million middle-class American households took this deduction in 2015. So you're talking about helping middle-class Americans. 28 million households in that bracket took the SALT deduction. You're talking about
We've got to
eliminating.
lower the rate enough that those 28 million are paying less in taxes. The objective on this is to cut everybody's taxes. And you know, it was interesting. I'll say a couple of things. Number one, you know, Bernie talks about all the things he wants the federal government to spend on. He wants free education for everyone. He wants free health care for everyone. He wants a chicken in every pot.
No,
you noticed he hasn't said, look, if he were in Colorado, it'd be pot in every chicken, but that's different. You know what he hasn't told you? A single bit of government spending he'd cut, because I don't think it exists.
Oh, yeah. You want to ask me the question?
And let me say beyond that, he also hasn't addressed how you pay for all this. Look, you think healthcare is expensive now. Wait till it's free.
Okay.
The costs that are associated, and he's never once addressed the fact confiscating the millionaires doesn't pay for it.
Okay,
Bernie read, hold on a second. I didn't interrupt you.
Okay.
Bernie read several quotes. Let me read a quote back at you. Our present income tax rate structure now holds back consumer demand, initiative, and investment. The largest single barrier to full employment of our manpower and resources and to a higher rate of economic growth is the unrealistically heavy drag on federal income taxes on private purchasing power, initiative, and incentive. Now, you know who it was that said that? It was John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was a passionate advocate of cutting taxes. John F. Kennedy would be drummed out of the Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren Democratic Party because he campaigned on cutting taxes. And not only that, he promised, he said, if we cut taxes, we'll get 5% economic growth. And you know what happened? He came into office, he cut taxes, and he saw 5% economic growth. The same thing happened under Ronald Reagan, where he cut taxes and the economy took off. Jimmy Carter and Obama raised taxes and the economy went into a nosedive.
Fact check. Ronald Reagan raised taxes 4 separate times.
Which was more?
Four
the decrease?
separate.
Hold on, you said he cut
That
too
is,
much.
no. You forgot to mention that. The reason he raised taxes 4 separate times is because lack of revenue coming in from his tax breaks. Now, second of all, let me make you ask me a question. What program did I cut? Now, Ted, I gather you are a big deficit hawk, yeah?
Indeed.
Indeed, okay. And that's why you are supporting legislation that would increase the national debt by $1.5 trillion over 10 years. But above and beyond that, you asked me a fair question. You said, okay, what programs would I cut? Ted, how'd you vote on the authorization bill for the Department of Defense, which increased military spending by, if I'm not mistaken, $70 billion. So that we are now spending more on the military than the next 12 nations combined. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ted. I think you voted for that huge increase in military spending.
So
Is that right or not?
I voted enthusiastically, yes, and I will accept as your friendly amendment. You will slash the military. You'll cut the Army and Navy and Marines and Air Force, but you won't cut anything else. So fine, I agree. You'll cut the military. And I think that's an enormous mistake.
No, we're going to
cut. Yes, you would cut the military.
Okay. No.
I'll concede.
All right. But don't concede to me. You have to explain to people.
You would cut the military. I wouldn't. That's a real difference.
Cut the military.
Democrats want to cut the military. Republicans want to defend our nation. That's a real difference.
That is inaccurate statement. What was the vote on that?
Would you cut the military?
What was the vote? You just said Democrats.
I voted yes. You voted no.
Correct. But how many people voted no?
Oh, I don't know, but this is
a
great
few.
point.
There was about 10. Well, let me finish. All right. There was about.
You're asking me a question. Let me respond to it.
You said Democrats voted to cut the military. In fact, they did. Overwhelmingly, they voted the same way you did. I voted no, because I think that at a time when we have people working 2 or 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet, where kids can't afford to go to college or leaving school deeply in debt, I happen not to think that spending $70 billion more on the military and giving a huge boondoggle to the military industrial complex that Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us about, I happen to think that was not a good idea. I'll tell you what else I would cut. I would end a lot of the tax wealth. I would tell you what else I would cut would be oil subsidies and tax breaks. You work me on that? We're going to do away with the billions
of dollars. You're talking about?
Oh, the oil depletion allowance.
That's ordinary expensing that every other business has. But you want to punish one particular sector. I think we should treat every energy source fairly. And I'll give an example of that. I went to Iowa and campaigned on ending the ethanol mandate, which is corporate welfare. You, of course, wouldn't end the corporate welfare and campaign in the same state, correct?
We have a lot more to talk about corporate welfare, about the deficit.
Just say this.
We have to
take a quick break.
We have to make some money here. Thank you. CNN's Debate Night returns right after this.
Juicy. He's keeping it in there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes I feel I feel like some easy money is being left on the table here by Bernie, but he's definitely keeping fucking Cruz on his toes, man. He looks ridiculous in several moments.
Yeah, I mean the military spending thing is is pretty striking. That it's like you don't want to cut anything. Well, I would actually cut the sort of main thing other than Social Security for old people that the United States federal government spends money on.
Yeah, I do enjoy that's just such an essential context, like how much we spend relative to the world. And we always say something like that. We spend more than the next 12 countries combined, which is great. I always just want to add, most of which are our treaty allies and go to war with us. Most of them. Except for like the other 2 that have some, military budgets. Like it's also never quite taken to its full extent. But again, like Cruz is bringing up, like he never did remember people. He never answered, my leprechaun charm question about how he's going to pay for that 10-year figure with the annual figure. Don't forget that original lie I told, still working for me. That's nice. Just like, Cruz, because he's so shallow, wants to keep bringing it back to the debate talking point and just be like, why do you want more government to be the answer to everything? You never want to cut any programs, Like, it's easy to say, if we cut the estate tax, cut taxes on the rich so much, they end up with enough money that they can, like, control the society. They come out with, like, lots of power. Yeah. So why wouldn't we cut taxes on these people? Well, because then they buy a news station, see, and they create a political base by filtering the information everyone gets. So when this tax hole blows a hole in the budget again, and your party wants to cut Medicare, like they're going to tell half the Medicare beneficiaries that this will only hurt immigrants or black people or something. So they'll accept it. Like that's the problem here is you're putting these elites in charge of society. You don't like, George Steyer, or you're the party that cut his taxes, dimwit. Like all of this rebounds to your right-wing policy. I feel like just a little bit of this like neoliberal context would like give I want to help the working class just maybe that's, again, I'm a a nerdy debater myself, so maybe this is why we aren't successful in politics, Ben, is because we want to teach instead of making Ted Cruz look stupid.
Yeah. I mean, it's all, so there's definitely, there is definitely that. I mean, it's also really astonishing for Cruz to say like, oh, he never addressed, how he would pay for it. It's like literally that $13 trillion figure that you're trying to demagogue about without making it clear that it's over 10 years and that the millionaire thing that you also want Bernie to address was per year. But it's like that $13 trillion figure you're talking about comes from Bernie laid out all the numbers. It's like, okay, here's exactly how Medicare for all would work. Here's how much it would cost. And here's the tax plan to pay for it, right? I mean, that is where the number comes from the thing that, he said, like, literally he's saying, oh, you never said where, how you would pay for it. It's like, no, the thing you started out demagoguing about is a number that's plucked from when he said how he was going to pay for it. And everybody who's looked at this, even the libertarians, the Mercatus Center, said that overall it would be more, that like having single payer healthcare, it's paid for through progressive taxation, would mean that the entire system took up less resources than the current U.S. healthcare system, and it would mean that middle income taxpayers who have private health insurance would, yes, their tax bill would go up, but their co-pays, premiums, deductibles, etc., would go down to zero, and it would be a big net savings for them.
Indeed. Like, yeah, that's like you will come out ahead with this plan. Like, Cruz is saying that math can happen by them taking away the blue states' income tax deduction, which was like I was surprised when that went in 2017. I was like, this is the Trump party, because his like imbecilic loose grip on the party, and then, their platform is just whatever he says. Like, it started to lead to more like intra-U.S. conflict, like the red state, that dominates the Senate because of the rule bias of the Senate state representation system. Like, they're saying like, yeah, and take away that deduction that helps those blue states and their economy. It's like actually starting to like stick it and fuck up another half of the country, the one that actually has more people and money, by the way. Like, that's something that I think the Bush era, they wouldn't have put that in their 2017. If Jeb Bush had somehow been the nominee and won, I don't think, I kind of doubt, at least this has just been my analysis, I doubt that would appear along with their giant corporate tax cut, which of course Jeb would have done. Yeah, because there's no point in breaking up this national consensus, but that we can grip on the party. Cruz could say, oh, well, they'll come out ahead. We'll just cut your rates that much. And it's like, you're fucking over like large economic units of the country. It's amazing when it starts getting into more like, I'll just stamp my partner.
We're getting, we just have to cut it until it ends up being a savings. Like, okay, that's fine. But this specific thing you're proposing right now, we just heard, is going to mean that, like, was it 30 or 40% of the country would actually be paying more in taxes than it was before. So it's like the fact that theoretically you would propose, support something else in the future that would mean that those people's taxes would go down. It's like, okay, fine. Right now you're raising their taxes. And this is not the only example of this in the Trump tax cut. I mean, it's a big one, but my favorite example is that the Trump tax cut they're arguing about taxed union dues, which had been tax exempt before that, right? So any worker who's a member of the union, their taxes actually went up, as a result of this thing. So it's like all that rhetoric about, oh, everybody should be paying less in taxes. Like, no, you were doing things that meant a lot of people were paying less in taxes, and if you're extremely rich, you're paying a lot less in taxes. But if you're a piece of shit heir who never worked a day in his life, then you got that extra $7 million, before your state tax kicked in, but big chunks of the country are paying more in taxes because of this.
Yeah, it's true. It doesn't affect us here in the great state of Washington. For people who don't live here, we are in the blue state bloc, standing strong against Trump and all the elections and so forth. That's nice. And you get a lot of blue state amenities like your legal marijuana and so forth, which, I'm very grateful for. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But we have the most regressive tax structure in the country because there's no state income tax of any type, proving Ted Cruz correct that the numerous billionaires that we have voted with their feet and, capital moved to where it gets the best treatment, the South and Washington. So you didn't see us on that list of states that was migrating people out, or that graphic that Ted Cruz showed. Because no one's leaving us because of our state. We are a growing state, in population, but also we don't have a state tax. It's why we have a really fucked up tax situation and why we have a Supreme Court judgment against us for not funding our schools enough. And why if any bridge you drive over in the state, anytime you buy alcohol or a meal out, there's a large, fairly hearty tax markup on that because we don't have billionaires paying any income tax. They don't pay any state tax. So it like kind of fucks up the economy for the rest of us. It's impossible to figure out how much tax you're paying. Like we're the state that does, with regard to state taxes, what Ted Cruz wants. We weren't affected by this change in the state tax deduction policy. And it sucks. It's like a huge problem for us. The GF works as a public school teacher, and they have a huge number of problems. Thank God we have unions that we pay taxes on our dues to, thanks to this smiling debate prick. So, at least we have some ability to push back on a little bit of this. And just the last thing I'll say about it is like Cruz, hits on taxes, and you're sending taxes. It's gone in tax. Send a paycheck to the government in tax. You get services, you pie-faced fuck. I withdraw that. You get services, you pie-faced dick. Like that's like that. You get Medicare. And Sanders, because he has real political instincts, like knows to go to they're going to cut your Medicare. They're going to cut the schools. Like he knows to take it there when he remembers it or when he can get a word in edgewise. Like that's the thing to always say. Taxes bring services, especially all you Republicans who want to give $1 trillion a year to the armed services, which we are literally approaching. Like that is. Just in the straight budget, we already pay more than $1 trillion for the war machine. It's so much other stuff. Like that taxes pay the precious military. Like how can you people be this pathetically used as pawns in the class warfare?
Yeah, I want to know how many, specifically what the number, because it's like, okay, more than the military budgets of the next 12 countries combined. That's a lot. And to be fair, I think due to recent events, it might be, down to just the next 10 countries or something now. But to your point earlier, it's like, I really want to know, it's like, okay, what's the version of that list look like if it were just countries that aren't members of NATO? How many of those do you have to combine to make it to, U.S. defense spending?
Yeah. That could take a minute. It's so great now that countries are like, we're finally going to meet that NATO commitment. Like, fucking great. That's good. You already have large fascist parties now because you stopped having because you're cutting back on your social democracy. Like now, don't worry, we'll continue to parasitize resources onto some hideous contractor to make artillery shells for Ukraine.
Yeah. Did you see that? Do you see Henry Kissinger, who is still being I don't know, whatever they have to do to transport him around. I mean, I'm just kind of imagining him being on one of the floaty things from WALL-E, but he is they're still transporting him to news stations to ask him his opinions about things, because he's an elder statesman. Gotta respect Henry Kissinger.
And how?
And his in response to anti-Israel protests in European countries, he said it was a mistake for them to take in so many immigrants.
Yeah. That you've hurt your country, Mr. Prime Minister, with all these migrants. Like, yeah. Sure. Why wouldn't you throw that on the pile? Like, on his record at this point, like if he actually killed a couple people now, it would be like a one footnote in his horrible legacy. Like at this point, he could say or do almost anything, and it's a, it's a dime on a battleship there. But
it's just particularly nice because it's like, I don't know. I mean, what's the like, some of these people you're saying, it was such a mistake to take them in. It's like I don't know, man. It's like, do you think people in this part of the world were more or less likely to be fleeing westward to find some sort of sanctuary because of all the shit you did over the course of your career?
Yeah, can you believe these countries are shedding people, Henry? It's what a mystery. That is pretty rich too. It's like, let these immigrants in, they ruin your country. Well, we let you in, you crowd, like you came in the door. That's no problem. Like, that's all right. We're white people. I mean, that's, and we're interchangeable, basically. I can come in. No one gives a shit about that. Pretty stunning, Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. All right, let's watch just a couple more minutes, then we'll go to the post game for patrons to watch the last half hour there.
Love the production.
Senators, with the fact that President Trump promised this morning to increase the child tax credit, which currently allows middle and working class parents to take a $1,000 tax credit for each child under 17. And I want to introduce Jasmine Simon from Nevada. She is a single mom who works 2 jobs, and she has a question for Senator Cruz. Jasmine?
Like many Americans, I make hard decisions to support my daughter. One of the hardest choices has been postponing my college degree so that I could afford my daughter's daily needs. One of the most expensive needs is childcare. I'm willing to sacrifice anything for my daughter, but working multiple jobs and still trying to make ends meet each month sometimes seems impossible. My question to you is that isn't the child tax credit a little too late for families like mine when I need to pay my bills every month, including childcare, not just in April?
Jasmine, thank you for that question. And let me commend you. I've got to say, being a single mom may be the hardest job there is in the whole world. And I'll tell you, I come from a family of single moms. My sister was a single mom. Both my aunts were a single mom. And for a period of time, my own mother was a single mom when my dad left us when I was a little kid. Thankfully, he came back, so I didn't grow up with a single mom. But the challenges that are on your shoulders, your kids are relying on you every day, and it's hard. You're trying to provide for them. You're trying to teach them. You're trying to raise them. You're trying to love them. And there are only so many hours.
Man, he's trying to run out the clock on this one.
There, man, I gotta say, it's great how he's done this once or twice, in the evening. Like, he has that great politician thing where it's like he is the relatable poor family, and it's like the horrors of all the other members of the family. Like, oh, my aunt and my mom, and oh my God, it was very difficult. I was skipping around with a giant pinwheel lollipop and a felt coat, but oh my God, people I knew, they worked hard. It's hard. Yeah, it's fucking hard to be a single mom, partly because your piece of shit party cut the friggin' classic welfare program, which is based on supporting people with kids if they're poor. Like, oh, welfare disencourages work. Well, they have kids, though. Right. And you're supposed to give a shit about them, like fucking Cruz. Like, this is on your fat-faced party, you scumbag. Cruz has driven me to shift to whiskey from tea. I'm sure the viewers have noticed this. No, Cruz, this is why I drink. Are you happy? Child tax credit is so wimpy, by the way. $2,000 a kid.
You give every day for your kids. When it comes to the child tax credit, it's designed to help moms like you. It's designed to say you need more money in your pocket. And so part of the framework that's being laid out is to increase that child tax credit so that you would get more. And right now it's refundable, which means you can get a check. Not only do you not pay taxes, but if you're not paying taxes, you can get a check as well. And so it's designed to help make it easier to deal with how hard it is to be a single mom. But I'll tell you, I think the single best thing that would help you and so many other single moms is to have a growing economic environment where you had better job opportunities, where your wages were going up. I think it would make it easier to provide for your kids if your wages were going up and they weren't going down. And I would note there are a lot of single moms who are working a couple of jobs. Why? Because Obamacare defines a full-time employee as 30 hours a week. And there are millions of people across this country who are working 28 and 29 hours a week because their employers won't pay them full time. They're single moms who are having to work 2 and 3 jobs at the same time. That's not fair. It's not right. And interestingly enough, Bernie and the Democrats don't have an answer to those moms who are the 29ers working 2 and 3 part-time jobs. I'd like to see you be able to get a job that pays you well, that puts you on a path towards a career to provide for your kids.
Senator Sanders, I want you to respond, but as you do, I'd like to ask about the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, who has been meeting on Capitol Hill with lawmakers and policy groups. She is discussing the child tax credit. Senator Marco Rubio said last week he thinks the issue would have universal support. Is this a proposal you can get behind?
Absolutely. Look, let's be clear about it. You know, Ted talks a lot about he hates taxes and taxes, but the corresponding fact is that we do not have the resources to do what we should, among other things, for our children. Ted, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world. Do you know that there are countries out there where mothers like Jasmine would not have to ask that question? Do you know why, Jasmine? Because they have universal preschools. They have strong early childhood education opportunities that are available to all families, regardless of their income. I believe in that. And I think it's a lot more important that we invest in our children and in early childhood education. This proposal that Senator Cruz is supporting would make massive cuts in the Head Start program. How dumb is that when we have to put more resources into our children? We're talking about taxes today, but Donna, you know what? This is not just about taxes. It is a vision for America. I want to raise taxes on upper income people to do what? To expand Social Security. Senator Cruz, I think you were quoted as saying Social Security is a Ponzi scheme.
I've never said that. That's false.
Okay, then you were quoted as that. If you tell me it's false, then I accept that. Okay. I want to expand Social Security. You'll tell us in a moment what your view on Social Security is. I want to make Medicare available. Jasmine, what it would mean for your family if you didn't have to worry about health insurance, that you and your kids had health insurance as a right, and to understand that despite what Senator Cruz is saying, we spend in this nation twice as much, $10,000 per person on healthcare as Canada and any other industrialized country. And the reason for that is we have a healthcare system not designed to provide quality, cost-effective healthcare. It's to make the drug companies have billions and billions of dollars in profit, as well as the insurance companies. So when we talk about our national priorities, it is not just taxes. It is what taxes do for the American people. If you cut taxes for the rich and you don't have the money to do the right things, then you led to the situation where Senator Cruz is in. $1 trillion cuts in Medicaid, 15 million people losing their Medicaid, $470 billion cuts in Medicare, cuts in Head Start, cuts in the Pell Grant program. Is that the America we want?
Senator Cruz?
I don't think so.
Well, you know, Bernie is fond of saying cuts, and cuts only in the language of Washington, where a slight decrease in a future rate of growth, where the spending next year is higher than the spending this year. Only in Washington is that considered a cut. But let me say something about
that. Is an outrageous statement, because 15 million people are going to lose their health insurance. I think those people would think this is a cut.
You know what the 15 million, you know what people have heard under Obamacare is that under Obamacare, the average premium have increased over $5,000 a year. Obamacare is a failure. And what's happening?
Why are we talking about Obamacare?
Bernie, I didn't interrupt you.
Yep.
Oh, man, Bernie Sanders really should have thought of the fact that Obamacare sucks. That really would have changed his message in 2016.
Why did he campaign on Obamacare for all? Why did he do that?
Yeah, exactly. That's his famous 2016 campaign message, Obamacare is great. We solved healthcare. Next issue, please.
Yes, that's great. You know, I mean, this goes to show you can be as mendacious as you want when you have no fucking scruples, you know. I mean, we've all seen how this operates, but I do love, like, it's the child tax credit. It's good. It'll be good for you. It's $2,000 a kid. Like, that's not going to make it out of the hospital at all. Seriously, for majority of people who give birth, like, it's far larger bills than that out of pocket. It was true in my family recently. There was a kid that is common. Like, this is like crumbs. It's, well, everyone got their tax cut in my lovely tax bill. Yes, you get $10. I get $80 million every year. It's like amazing how, like, you just have to, it's very, it's impossible. Like, as the professor editing this, I want to point out every error. Like, that's a pretty good social democratic pitch Bernie just gave out. We got to recognize this. But just you're getting crumbs, so everyone's getting something. I mean, yes, next year we'll cut the fire department because the Kochs are getting 1 trillion of cuts a year. But that's, just it's insane mendacity, man. But this nonstop, Obama, here's one of Obama's flaws. Like, Obamacare's a failure. Yeah, because it's one of your right-wing policies. Because it's one of his right-wing choices. It's your shit. So, of course, it's a fucking failure. Like, yes, obviously. It's,
Yeah, no, I was just saying as you were saying this, if I could look this up real quick, my Google is failing me, but saw a great video recently of I think actually what I watched was a reaction video. It's like a American maternity nurse watching this video of this nurse in Scotland showing in Scotland, not only is having a kid free, imagine that, that you don't leave the hospital with a bill, but you get this package of stuff from the Scottish government that's like here's some diapers, here's like a crib, like here's like a bunch of things that you'll need going forward, which is sort of pretty different from the approach in this country.
Wow, it's an actual physical family fun pack. That's great.
yeah, exactly.
It's even better than the economic one. Like, here's just a box of some shit. That's great. Yeah, my brother had a kid last year, and it's great. The kid's just adorable and doing great. But I mean, my God, the amounts of money involved. And for daycare, it's the joke I've heard people saying is it's second rent daycare. You pay rent on 2 places. It's incredible. Luckily we got my mom around some of the time. To the traditional babysitting model of exploiting your surviving relatives, like that's the classic method. We have that, but that's and of course finally there. What really would help you, ma'am, is a growing economic environment. Then the paycheck at your job that you go to while your child is raised by a stranger at a cost of 90% of what you make per hour. It will be bigger slightly than if we don't cut taxes on the brothers' rocket car bill, which is
not universal pre-K, like Bertie was just talking about.
That's you'll pay for kindergarten out of part of that 2,000. That's like just a little slice of that, I'm sure. I should think.
Yeah, that is got to be one of the. The most depressing things in the last few years of American politics when Biden first came in and he was doing some temporary COVID relief, much like Trump had done, in his last year in office. And they but the media was real excited about Biden. So there were like all these breathless articles about how he was the second FDR. And
that's pretty rich.
And in the course of that, like one of the things they made the biggest deal of was because they were expanding the child tax credit as part of the temporary COVID relief, and said, "Oh my God, we have cut child poverty by 50%."
Oh my God.
And then it's like, well, okay, now that's lapsed. So, do the math.
Yeah, watching all these COVID era social democratic measures just like be allowed to expire one after another while we've got while the Democrats have a Senate majority and Democrat in the White House, like this is, the shadow cast by this could include the Trump victory next year. Like that's just a stunning thing for them to not fight on, because that's what Cruz is. The subtext of what Cruz bitches at Bernie about all the time is that one-way ratchet. Like once people get social democracy, it's almost impossible to talk them out of it unless they're a small country that goes through like a default, to the IMF compels them, and the bond market can like force those terms on them. Like large sovereign states like the U.S. or Europe, like once people have that, like, well, why would I give up the universal health insurance for people of a certain age like myself? Like it's just so common sense. And like there's nothing conservatives in the world resent more, including immigration and the female ballot, then they resent that one-way ratchet. And just once social democracy is popular, we mostly keep it from you. Oh, fuck, JFK got assassinated and Johnson's able to push through Medicare, or Medicaid, I guess is accurate. Like that's like, damn it, they got one. No, we'll never get, they love it. Oh, no.
Which is a good reference for
charter schools. Like public schools still have that enduring popularity. It's like, damn, they got it. It's harder to pull it away from them than to keep it out of their hands, the public.
Yeah, Kennedy assassination is a good reference for a video involving Ted Cruz. That was probably my favorite point in the last several years of American electoral politics was in 2016. The day he clinched the delegate threshold for the Republican nomination, Donald Trump publicly speculated that Ted Cruz's dad was involved in the Kennedy assassination.
God.
And then this fucking cuck campaigned for him anyway.
Oh yeah, every one of these, like, he's the biggest threat to us, like, Chris Christie and Lindsey Graham and Cruz are all like, well, I'm a conservative. I believe in hierarchy. You finally beat me in the hierarchy. I will now, gently fondle your velvety balls now because you won. So now it's the Democrats that are the threat. Trump is the best thing ever.
I mean, Lindsey Graham, who, Ted Cruz is a solid runner-up on this because Trump both suggested that his dad was involved in the Kennedy assassination and famously insulted his wife. But probably the number one funniest Republican bending the knee to Trump was Lindsey Graham back in the news because he said the other day that we're in a religious war and Israel should flatten Gaza. Lindsey Graham, which, I don't know, call me old fashioned. I think if you're going to declare a jihad, you should show up yourself and, make yourself one of the martyrs. But
what happened to leading the troops into battle, Mr. Big Time? I'm sure we can replace you.
Yeah, exactly. No
Where are we
way.
going to find another right-wing closeted Southerner? It's impossible.
Yeah, I know. We already ran out of those. But it's like Lindsey Graham is the funniest one of those guys because Donald Trump literally took out his phone and read out Lindsey Graham's real phone number at a rally.
Oh my God. I don't know if I ever heard that. Wow.
Okay, well, we'll see if we can find the video and we'll see if we can find the video and play it in the post game because this is very, very funny that Graham just took it and bent the knee anyway. God. I guess I don't know. I mean, it's like the when the shoe was on the other foot, and it's like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, endorsing, Biden, because, thank God the, Mayor Pete and Obama, got together and made sure that, we wouldn't have this crazy guy and his, universal pre-K. I mean, really dodged a bullet there. But okay, so the justification for that, is, making sure that, it's like, okay, Republicans are going to do all this evil shit. And so it's like, as bad as it is, to have Biden, or Hillary, it's still not as bad. So I guess maybe if you want, you could construe Cruz and Graham as just being, honorably dedicated to the biggest possible tax break for rich people, but willing to put aside personal slights to make that happen. So I guess if you want to admire that, you can admire that. But on that note,
admire these doormats.
We are going to the post game to watch the last 25 minutes of this. So if you're a patron, you should have already had the email with the link for that for a while. If you were not, patreon.com/Ben Burgis. $5 a month, monthly cost of a milkshake at a 50s nostalgia diner in 1994. Get patron exclusive post games every Monday and Thursday nights, access to the Discord server, early access to various things, all sorts of nice goodies, but mostly our eternal love and gratitude for helping us keep things going. There is now a link to the Siaka debate on October 22nd in the description for this stream. should read all of Rob's books and read them at Current Affairs. If you are a patron, I will see you over there on the other side in about 90 seconds.